Greetings, YouTube. So straight out of the gate, I want to apologize for a video I did, I released on June 25th of 2022. I actually don't know when this video is going to go up. I film many of these far in advance of their ever being released. And it was about talking about how 5th edition, in my opinion, was bringing back the community from the fission that had been created, in my opinion, by 4th edition. And I perseverated upon my dislike for 4th edition in a very pointed way, which people thought was ironic because I was talking about the fact that I felt that 5th edition was bringing people back together that had been driven apart by that release of the game, and the fans of Pathfinder and the fans of, 4th edition and the fans of 3.5, and maybe we can all come back together in 5th edition because, let's face it, Wizards of the Coast would really love to have all of those fans under their tent as opposed to over in Palladium's playground. So, not Palladium, sorry, Pathfinders. I just did a video about Palladium. I apologize. I didn't mean to be that divisive when I was talking about 4th edition. It wasn't my intent. And I got called out on it, and I addressed it in the comments with a couple of people. But I began to really think about it. And I realized that what's going on inside my head, while it makes perfect sense to me, doesn't necessarily mean it makes a perfect sense to anybody else. I have come to understand that my brain doesn't function the way a lot of people's do. And I say that not because I'm being hard on myself, but because I have mental illness. My brain doesn't produce serotonin. I now buy it in a bottle. And I think I may either have achieved or I'm creeping up on the target dosage that I need, which is currently 150 milligrams of slow release twice a day. But I have also recently been diagnosed with ADHD, which is one of the reasons I cranked that serotonin level up. And it's helping. It's not only helping my ability to perceive the world in a healthier, more well-adjusted way, but it's also helping me to take on some of the chaos in my life. And I know you can't tell it in this room, but I am slowly making things less chaotic in my life. Every time I leave this room to go to my shop, I take something with me that needs to go to the shop, down to the shop. That may seem like a very small thing to most people. I understand that. It isn't to me. And anybody out there who has ADHD, they'll understand that. So my brain chemistry literally doesn't function the way a neurotypical person's brain was. I'm not saying I'm totally neurodivergent. I don't know what I am. I don't. I may never get a full diagnosis. I'm not sure if it will ever be clearly defined, and I'm okay with that. I don't mind a little mystery in my life. But because of that, when I think about D&D, I don't think about it in the same way other folks do. One of the commenters presented something to me which I thought was odd, in that anything with the name Dungeons & Dragons is Dungeons & Dragons. And that seems very raw to me, rules as written. That if these are the rule set, you play them the way they were written, you do not diverge. Period. I know there are folks that cleave very closely to that. I doubt there's anyone that's ever actually done it. I don't believe that there's any rule system out there that a person can't look at and say, I don't agree with that. I just don't believe that. I don't even think that the people that write it play their own system exactly the way it's presented to the world. They're going to tweak it over time. That's just what happens. But the idea that whatever has the name Dungeons & Dragons on it is Dungeons & Dragons struck me as strange. Because for me, Dungeons & Dragons isn't a box that you put rules in. Dungeons & Dragons is a lineage. And it starts, for me, with the first edition hardcover Advanced Dungeons & Dragons books. That's where I entered the hobby. That's the first edition I played, even though I own the older editions kicking around my office. I've got a rule cyclopedia sitting right here next to me. I never played those. I started with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons first edition. And I have all of the first edition, first printings in my collection. And to me, second edition was a seamless transition. In fact, I used first edition material with second edition on the fly without any kind of conversion other than in my head. Never missed a beat. Okay? And then along came third edition, and I thought it was revelatory. It was eye-opening. The skies opened up, sunbeams, oh, kind of thing. It was awesome. But I still saw the connection from first edition, second edition to third edition. And then along comes 3.5, which I feel refined third edition into the best official edition of D&D that's ever been created. And one of the things I loved about third edition, besides the actual rules themselves, was the OGL, the SRD. The OGL, the Open Gaming License, and the System Resource Document, that it became available to us, I have said it 1,000 times, I believe is the greatest gift our hobby has ever received. Period. It has done so much good for us. It has inspired so many companies that exist now. Even though those companies are dealing with game systems that have nothing to do with the OGL now, they came into being because they produced OGL material. So we have an endless number of gratitudes to heap upon the OGL, in my opinion. So lots of things sprung from third edition. And when fourth edition was announced and released, and its structure was significantly different from 3.5, part of one of those things that branched off was Pathfinder. And I saw again the DNA of first edition AD&D in Pathfinder P1. I see it in P2. It's less visible, but it's still there. I see it in 5th edition, less visible and prevalent than 3.5, but it's there. I see it in P2. Sorry, I said P2. Sorry, my apologies. But it's there. I never saw it in 4th edition, which is why I don't ever refer to 4th edition as something as other than 4th edition. I will call 5th edition D&D. I will call 3.x D&D to cover the two versions that were under that rubric. But I never have thought in my head of 4th edition as D&D. So what I'm trying to tell you is that when I make the claim, and people have called me on this and said, you're just wrong, that 4th edition isn't D&D, in my head, it isn't. I'm not being figurative, I'm not being metaphorical here, I am being literal. My brain simply does not accept it as being a version of Dungeons & Dragons. Because again, that the title Dungeons & Dragons is not a box you put things in. It is a lineage from 1st edition to 5th edition. So it goes 1st, 2nd, 3.x, P1, and then P2, 5th edition. Because for me, P2 and 5th edition pretty much came out at the same time because I read them back to back. So even though 5th edition came out first, I still, in my head, they're kind of meshed together. So that's how I see it. So I'm not being facetious. That's not an act of hyperbole when I'm talking about the fact that I could think of Pathfinder as the best version of D&D that's ever been created. I know there are folks that agree with me. My friend Amy does. Maybe that's why she's my friend Amy. But I understand how that statement could rankle some people who think of D&D as a box you put rules in. That the title is what matters, and the rules inside that box are less important. For me, the contents of that box are what matters, and the title is less important. And those are two very different ways of looking at the world. And I now understand that. And I will make a concerted effort to not piss off people that think of D&D as a box, while I'm looking at the world from the lens of D&D as lineage. Because I think those are very much what the problem is. That why we have such animosity between the 4th edition players and the folks that play 3.x or Pathfinder. That some of us saw 4th edition as one of the commenters under that June 25th video commented about as combat as sport, which harkens back to the wargaming roots that inspired the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. Absolutely. But guess what? I don't want to play that. I don't want to play war games. I've tried it. I can't do it. I project myself into characters. I'm projecting myself into those little plastic things on the table. I am a role player. I am not a war gamer. And so 4th edition really does seem to harken back to the original roots that inspired 1st edition gaming. 1st edition, awesome, great. If you are looking for combat as sport, I've heard 4th edition is for you. That has never been and never will be what D&D is to me. D&D is not combat as sport. D&D is collective storytelling. It is the characters that we love, villains that we hate, worlds that we build. I follow 2 different folks on YouTube that do deep role-playing series on a number of different games, but specifically Skyrim and Fallout. They've done lots of stuff in both of those games. Lots of stuff. And in fact, one of them, Gopher, is even a modder. I don't believe John from Many True Nerds is. And they have 2 very different styles of doing videos, of playing the games. Gopher immerses himself into a character. He creates a world and a history and a path, and he has run single character campaigns in Pathfinder for hundreds of episodes that are captivating because you want to know what they're going to do next. You want to know how they're going to develop in the future. John, from Many True Nerds, plays the game. He doesn't play a character in the game. He plays the game. So he does things that are wildly out of character for anybody. Like, no one would do these things. No sane person, no sane character would do all these different things. But John isn't playing a character in the game. He's playing the system. He's trying to achieve a goal. Like, for example, playing all the way through Fallout 4 with you only live once. So only the hit points you get at first level, at first out of the gate. No new hit points. And he survived. He did the same thing with all the versions. Well, not all. Like he did Fallout 3, New Vegas, and all of the content for Fallout 4. He's done kill everything, where that's the goal, kill everything. And you can't be a character in a world where you're killing everything. You're not. You're a force of nature. But he's done lots of things like that. Weird, bizarre, strange systems that he's come up with. They're absurd rule sets that he's imposed upon himself just to see if he could do it. He plays the game, not the character. It's 2 very different ways of looking at the world. And thinking of D&D as a box or D&D as a lineage are two very different ways of looking at the world. And I think that's the thing I've been grappling with for decades, for years at least, since 4th edition came out. How long has it been now? I don't know. I feel old. When I looked at a video recently, somebody had left a comment on I did about Starship Troopers, the Mongoose D20 version. I had no gray in my beard. Boy, did that make me feel old. But yeah. So yeah, that's the demarcation for me. And I understand it now. So I thank the folks in the comments of that video for getting me to the point where I grasp it. For me, D&D is a lineage. It always has been, and it probably always will be. And I'll be interested to see if I see a lineage in the next edition of D&D. Because I'm probably not going to play, except I'm not going to play 5th. But who knows? I hope I do. I hope it isn't another edition where it's a box with a bunch of rules in it with the name D&D on the outside. I'm hoping it's part of the lineage that I've seen for decades slowly evolve and change and morph. So let's talk about how we view the name D&D and the game D&D, which are different things. And I hope I haven't bored you silly. I've been chatting for a while. I am, as I have commented recently to somebody, a chatty bastard. So let's talk about how we view D&D and how maybe we can be kinder to our fellows in the community.